This is Luke Radowski of We Are Change.org, and I'm here with the one and only James Traficant, former congressman. I mean, they threw the book at you. You spent 7 years in jail.
Don't call me names.
Which names are those?
Congressman.
Now, of course, you have a very illustrious, amazing career. I think you've been through a lot. I mean, you've been thrown into jail for 7 years on many charges.
Almost 8.
Almost 8. You were, not in a country club jail. You were pretty much...
I was in prisons.
Yeah. Usually when politicians go to prison, they get the country club jail. You got the real prison.
I had one of the counselors at one place said that I was placed in that particular prison because 60% of the population were illegal immigrants, and that they knew that I passed legislation to put troops on the border. And he said, watch yourself, you don't get a knife in your kidney. And I end up going to the hole for several months. So I only had to watch one guy. I didn't have to watch 1,000 because I think they wanted to get me hurt. Everywhere I went was a very rough prison.
I bet so. And has your experience in prison changed your attitudes towards some of the policies you were pushing before?
No, I always supported, I think, the right policies. I think that's why I was put in prison with no evidence whatsoever. And my case may come back to light because they lied, and first of all, it was a 6-year investigation, over 250 federal agents at a cost of almost $25 million.
Wow. With
no physical evidence, and they testified at trial that they made no audio or video tapes of me in 6 years. So, that was a lie. Now it's coming back to haunt them because they found out they had videos in my cameras in my offices and all kind of tapes. But the reason they said that is that they had nothing on tape to show my guilt, and I could have used those tapes against them. So this case may flare back up again and bite them right on the ass where it should.
Why do you think they did this to you? I mean, 7 years
ago. In
ago.
1983, I'm the only American in history to ever defeat the Justice Department in a RICO trial, full jury verdict, pro se, without being an attorney. The only one. That embarrassed them. But second of all, I brought back John Demjanjuk in the late 80s from Israel, and I was a top target of American Israel Public Affairs Committee for having embarrassed them by proving that Demjanjuk was not Ivan the Terrible and bringing him back from death row. So I became a top target of the Israeli lobby, and no question, I'm labeled an anti-Semite, which I'm really not, but they do control much of our government, our press, Broadway, Hollywood, and the money system, and they basically control this country. And you do not want Israel as an enemy, and I became an enemy of Israel. That, I think, was my downfall.
Yeah. And this is the case that you looked into the Freedom of Information Act articles about this gentleman who was later acquitted. Is that correct?
Yes, he was sentenced and convicted to death and was on death row in German prison. And then I uncovered the evidence that proved that not only that he wasn't Ivan, but who Ivan really was. And I submitted it. First of all, the Sixth Circuit Court in Cincinnati would not accept the evidence, and Congress wouldn't hold a hearing. It was too sensitive. Yeah. And I said in Congress, since when does sensitivity waive the Bill of Rights? So the bottom line was that I sent it to the Israeli Supreme Court, and they released them after I did a Today Show interview with Brian Gumbel and said Israel's going to lose about $25 billion a year. And he said, well, they get $3 billion, Congressman. I said, that's only one bill. I said, yeah, that's the foreign aid bill. And I said, that's $5,000 for every man, woman, child in Israel. I said, but no one's looking at loans converted to grants, economic assistance, military assistance, trade compact. I said, they get about $25 billion a year. 35, 40,000 for every man, woman, and child from the American taxpayers. And I said, they put this man to death on the strength of the evidence I've submitted. They're going to lose that money. It's going to blow up in their face. Hell, I got a call that night from the Israeli Supreme Court in my hotel room in Jerusalem. It said, he will be delivered to me tomorrow night at Tel Aviv airport. Take him home. And I brought him home. Wow. And as soon as they put me in prison, they took him back to trial. They'd have never taken him back anywhere if I was still in Congress. Because they know I would have stood on the House floor and said, how many times are you going to do this to this guy, And it was a really trumped-up charge that he lied on some papers. And they all did. All those Ukrainians did, because if they didn't, they'd have been repatriated back to the Ukraine, and Stalin would have put them up in front of a firing line and executed them. Yeah. They all lied.
That's definitely true. Now, I heard when you were in office, you also refused to foreclose on people's homes.
When I was a sheriff, yes, I wouldn't sign the transfer deeds and forced them to come to grips with it, with the banks and in the court in Youngstown, and they gave reprieve to people. When I was in Congress, I passed legislation for a housing counseling assistance with an 800 number a 45-day notice must be given, and a program that works out differences with the borrower and the bank. And even some of the newspapers would give me a lot of good press that it was a good program, saved a lot of homes.
Yeah, I bet it definitely did, especially with everything that has come out from the 2008 crash that, just showed the pure amount of criminal activity that the big bankers have been committing, especially with the foreclosure of homes. Since coming out of jail, what's your take on everything that has come out from that?
Well, you could see the inevitable collapse, and I'm predicted an implosion in our country similar to the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, by the year 2030. Now, Pat Buchanan has come out. From what I understand, he's predicted an implosion by 2025. I mean, the debt is becoming insurmountable, and people are going to get tired of sending their money to Washington and seeing that money go to cities like Detroit and Chicago and Los Angeles and New York, and that half of the working people are paying for half of the people who are not working, and it's going to blow up on their face. People are getting tired of spending taxes and seeing that tax money go to people who are not working and taking advantage of the system. A lot of them qualify. Many of them are abusing it. There are more people on Social Security disability in America than the entire population of Greece. Wow. Come on now. A lot of these people, some of them are drug dealers on the street, getting Social Security disability money, financing their street business.
Now, of course, the system can't continue because there's no way financially that it could even fathom all the money that's coming in and all the money that's coming out. But with your prediction, can you tell us more about that? And where did you make your prediction? Who did you talk to? And where can people find out more about it?
I more or less have stated it many times. I write columns for the American Free Press. I did a national interview with Greta Van Susteren where I discussed it, that there will be the implosion will definitely come. The debt is insurmountable. We're a managed debt economy nation. There's no question, and people are going to get sick and tired of it. We've got a tremendous illegal immigration problem, and we've got open borders. We've got a Homeland Security Agency with open borders. Yeah. And I passed legislation in Congress to bring 10,000 troops from overseas and put them on our borders. And it never saw the light of day because the Senate opposed it. McCain and those guys that want those Hispanic votes, and that's what we're in. Both parties are catering to this Hispanic vote. It's a big block of votes so they can continue to their continuity in office and maintain their majorities. So they're going overboard to help. But, it's just going to be another cycle of people moving towards government dependence. And there's too much. There's too much government dependence. I rate a classification of people known as government dependents is exceeding now 40% in the United States. Think about that. And we're at the point now where 50% are basically paying the taxes, and they're going to get fed up. They're still listening to the propaganda coming out of Washington. The truth is they're starting to wise up. They're getting fed up. And when the government starts to collapse, and you see the economy starting to break, that's when you'll see the restlessness of the American people. And, they see these political maps on TV, the blue and the red, where you're going to see blue states and red states. And some of these states are going to want to secede from the Union, and I can see it coming. I predict Alaska will be the very first. They have their own revenue stream, their big land mass. I see Texas and the compact of states separating. I see some of those states out there, Montana, Wyoming, they're just going to be tired of sending their money to Washington and seeing it be distributed to these cities, and they've had it. They're tired of paying the bills, and you can't blame them. And so no one's seeing the social disruption. No one's reading the symptoms. They're not problems in America. These are symptoms of a systemic collapse that no one's really looking at.
Is there a solution to any of these problems?
Well, number one, you have to throw out the income tax code. And everybody's got to pull their fair share. And the way you do that is with a consumption tax, and no one can avoid, and everybody pays. And Harvard did a study on the Traficant-Tozan bill years ago, which called for a flat sales tax for everything, and said that there would be no price increases. Because when you take out the tax code, 25% of the cost of producing a manufactured item in America is just to comply with the tax code and the voluminous tax code. So when you take that out, companies won't be looking for perks and looking for the ways to avoid taxes. They'll start looking for market share. Prices will come down. They'll have a margin to move down to. So when you do that, you'll see companies moving back to America, where America will be more hospitable to business and industry. Everybody talks about the patriotism of industry. Hey, they left because they can't make it here. Their competition is overseas without the regulatory burden and the cost burdens faced here, and they're getting their ass cleaned. So they've moved overseas to keep their business and industry afloat. And unless we change our policies and move towards a system where everybody pulls the load, it will collapse. And that is, I think, the big thing that must be done. It's one of the things I'll be talking about here today, the bill that I sponsored. I believe if I wasn't separated from Congress, I would have eventually passed that.
And then also at the same time, if we get rid of the taxes, we stop feeding the beast. The military-industrial complex, the medical one, the war on drugs, all those things would not happen.
You'll see all of it start to, the marketplace will start to straighten much of that out. And I think that's where we have to go. And you take the regulatory burden off, you'll be creating jobs the old-fashioned way, not government jobs. You know, everybody really hasn't looked at all these things that are happening, like Obamacare. Nobody's really labeled it. Obamacare is a jobs bill. You realize how many new jobs are created through that? Making it look like America's economy is growing. They create 169 new bureaucracies and agencies with all kind of positions and jobs. Just that one thing. Yeah. So they're creating government jobs. Like that one year, they had the big explosion of jobs. It showed a great revival in America. It turned out that 400,000 of those jobs were part-time census workers. Yeah. The government was paying. I mean, when it came to light, they were all embarrassed by it. Yeah. Look, you got to go the old-fashioned way. Government can't be hiring people. Government got to get the hell out of the way. We don't need a Department of Energy, a Department of Education. We don't need an EPA. Congress has set standards. The states could operate within those standards and set up their programs. This is the United States of America, not the central government of America.
Let's not also forget that with Obamacare, the IRS has been increased more than ever throughout history than before.
Well,
even
my bill would eliminate the IRS, and even though I don't believe it was ever legally ratified, it would repeal finally and put the nails in the coffin in the 16th Amendment. And it's time we do that. Sons of bitches.
Very well said.
On the air.
Definitely will. Now, I want to know what's next for you, Mr. Traficant, because I
don't know.
Even when you were in jail, you were running for Congress, which is
be careful. Yeah. I got to be careful. It's like a lot of friends say, they've already destroyed you, they've taken away your name. Be careful you don't get too much in the public eye again, because they'll kill you.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I guess, just after the massacre of internationals on the International Maritime Flotilla, the Mavi Mamre, trying to take aid via the sea to the besieged Gaza Strip.
The Intelligence Amendments Act of 2008, where they're entitled to listen in to foreign conversations, but